My name is Andrea Miles, and I'm 34 years old. For 11 months, my mother taped a fine to my front door every single Friday. 46 white envelopes, every one of them over a fence she had decided was the wrong color. My mother ran our homeowners association the way some people run small countries. Then, at the annual meeting last August, she stood at a podium in front of 60 of our neighbors and read my violations out loud, one by one, like a judge reading charges. She thought that night would put me in my place for good. She had no idea that a quiet woman in the third row, a woman who spends her workdays in the county deed room, was about to raise her hand and ask one simple question about Lot 14. What that question uncovered changed the room in under a minute, but what I chose to do next, with a single sheet of paper and a shoebox full of envelopes, is the part my family still can't talk about. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where quiet people finally speak up, and family secrets meet their paper trail. If stories about standing your ground with grace speak to you, drop a comment below and be sure to subscribe. Every Friday at 7:40 in the morning, a tan Buick slowed down in front of my house. It never stopped completely. It just rolled past at the speed of judgment, paused at my mailbox, and then a woman in a navy blazer walked up my path with an envelope and a roll of tape. She taped the envelope to my front door, pressed the corners down twice, and walked back to the car with her chin up like she'd just delivered a subpoena. That woman was my mother. The envelope always looked the same. Crisp, white, my address printed in her careful teacher's handwriting, and inside, a single page. Notice of violation. Unapproved fence stain, south and west property lines. Fine assessed, $50. Please remit to the Hollis Creek Homeowners Association. 48 Fridays came and went before this story ended, and I got 46 envelopes. She skipped the week of the January ice storm, and she skipped the week of my grandmother's anniversary, which is the detail I still turn over at night. I kept every single one in a shoebox on my kitchen counter, stacked in order like receipts, because I'm a land surveyor, and surveyors keep records the way other people keep grudges. I never went out to meet her. I'd stand at the kitchen window with my coffee going cold and watch her tape my name to my own door. She never rang the bell. She never waved. Once, in October, she straightened my porch flag on her way down the steps, which somehow made it worse. $50 a week doesn't break a person. That was never the point, and we both knew it. The point was the ritual. The whole neighborhood learning that Friday mornings meant Carolyn Miles paying a visit to her daughter's house with tape. Here's the thing nobody driving past would have guessed. Friday used to be my favorite day of the week. Friday used to mean coffee on that same porch with my grandmother, back when the fence was fresh and the two of us still had paint on our hands. I should back up, because none of this makes sense without my grandmother. Her name was Ruth Calder, and the house my mother kept fining is the house Ruth lived in for 36 years, Lot 12, Hollis Creek Subdivision, Millbrook, Georgia. I measure land for a living. I spend my days setting boundary stakes and certifying plats for a civil engineering firm north of Atlanta, which means I'm precise, I'm patient, and I'm nobody's idea of a troublemaker. 3 years ago, Grandma Ruth had a small stroke, and I gave up my apartment and moved into her spare room to help her. Best decision I ever made. We had one last good summer, and we spent a week of it painting her back fence together. She picked the color herself from the hardware store in town, a soft gray called Dove Wing. She held up the sample card and said it looked like a pigeon's feathers after rain, and if anyone on the association board had a problem with that, they could take it up with her personally. Nobody did. Nobody ever had a problem with Ruth. She died in her own bed one August morning, with her garden blooming outside the window. The will was simple. The house and everything that went with it came to me. When the estate finally closed, late the following summer, a full year of probate after we lost her, I signed papers in a lawyer's office and became the owner of the place where I'd learned to shell peas. I kept her furniture. I kept her rose beds. And I kept that fence exactly the color she chose, because some things you don't repaint. Past the back fence there was one more piece of the property everyone in my family just called the garden lot. A green, half-wild piece of ground with her old fig tree standing in the corner. Hold that thought. That unassuming patch of grass is where this whole story is headed, though I didn't know it yet that first Friday morning. Now, my mother, Carolyn Miles, 63 years old, retired front office manager at Millbrook High School, where she spent 3 decades enforcing other people's rules with a stapler and a laminated hall pass policy. She has perfect posture, a closet full of navy blazers, and handwriting so neat it looks typeset. For 25 years she was the secretary of the Hollis Creek Homeowners Association, taking minutes, filing paperwork, doing the unglamorous work while other people banged the gavel. 6 years ago, the old president finally retired to Florida, and my mother ran unopposed. She got herself a clipboard, a title, and a 34-page document she wrote herself called the Hollis Creek Community Standards, 112 houses in our subdivision, and she could tell you the mailbox height regulation for every one of them. And look, I want to be fair here, because it matters. She was good at parts of it. When a storm dropped a pine across Mrs. Abernathy's driveway, my mother had a crew there within 2 days. When the drainage backed up on the North Loop, she fought the county until it got fixed. People were a little afraid of her, but they also called her first when something broke. And she always answered. That's the complicated thing about people like my mother. The power isn't fake, it's just borrowed. It comes from a title on a letterhead and a room full of people who'd rather comply than argue, and it has to be fed constantly to stay alive. My mother never owned much in her life. She rented her power the way some people rent a tuxedo, and she wore it everywhere. My grandmother used to watch her daughter march around the neighborhood with that clipboard and get the strangest look on her face. Sad and fond at the same time. It took me years, and one very long August evening, to finally understand what that look meant. The first envelope showed up on a Friday in early September, about 3 weeks after the estate paperwork was finished and the deed was recorded in my name. I remember thinking it was a flyer for the fall yard sale. Then I opened it. Notice of violation, unapproved fence stain, $50. I actually laughed out loud, alone in my kitchen, because it had to be a mistake. That fence had been dove gray for 3 years. My grandmother had picked the color. So I called my mother, and that was the first strange conversation of many. "It's the standards, sweetheart," she said in the same voice she once used on sophomores without hall passes. "Approved stains are listed in Appendix C. Sandstone, clay, or white. Gray is not an approved neighborhood color." I told her the fence had been gray since before I owned the house. I told her Grandma painted it. There was a pause on the line, just a beat too long. "Your grandmother had her arrangements," she said. "You're the owner of record now. Owners of record follow the standards like everyone else." Owner of record. I remember exactly where I was standing when she said it, because it was such a strange, cold phrase to hear from the woman who taught me to ride a bike. That night I did what surveyors do. I went looking for the file, and I found it. Board minutes from 2019, typed and filed by the secretary herself. Fence stain at Lot 12, color dove wing gray, approved by unanimous vote. The approval was right there in the association's own records, recorded in my mother's own tidy signature. My fence wasn't in violation. It had never been in violation, which meant the fine wasn't about the fence at all. It had started 3 weeks after my name went on that deed, and it would keep coming, every Friday, until I understood what it was actually about. I didn't sulk, and I didn't pay. I did it by the book, because the book is where I live. I filed a written appeal with the Architectural Committee, attached a copy of the 2019 minutes, attached photos of the fence, and requested a hearing like the standards allowed. The hearing was on a Tuesday night in the clubhouse trailer, and I use the word hearing loosely. 4 board members sat behind a folding table with my mother in the center chair, the 5th seat empty since spring. I laid out my evidence in 6 calm minutes. The old approval, the dates, the photographs. Pete Grady, the treasurer, read the minutes twice, and looked genuinely uncomfortable. Then my mother folded her hands and said the prior approval had been granted to the prior owner, that approvals are not transferable, and that the board had an obligation to apply the standards uniformly going forward. She called me Ms. Miles the entire meeting, my own mother. The vote was 4-0 to deny, though Pete wouldn't meet my eyes when he raised his hand. I sat in my truck in the gravel parking lot afterward for a long time, watching the light in the trailer window, and a memory floated up from when I was about 10 years old. The city had once sent Grandma Ruth a citation for a fence that wasn't even hers, Some clerk had mixed up the parcels. I remember her reading it at the kitchen table, laughing her big laugh, and dropping the letter in the drawer like a losing raffle ticket. "Don't ever confuse the one holding the clipboard," she told me, "with the one holding the deed." I thought it was just a funny thing grandmothers say. I filed it away with all her other kitchen table proverbs and forgot about it for 20 years. My grandmother never just said funny things. I know that now. People always ask why I didn't just hire a lawyer right then, or sell the house, and let the whole neighborhood keep its beige. Fair questions from people who've never priced either option. A real estate attorney in our county runs $350 an hour. The fine was $50 a week. Fighting it in court would have cost more than a decade of Fridays, and my mother knew that arithmetic better than anyone. The fine was sized precisely to be cheaper to endure than to fight. Selling was never on the table. You don't sell your grandmother's rose beds to win an argument, and underneath all of it was the oldest math in the world. She was my mother. My Aunt Charlene called me twice that fall to say, "Don't make it a whole thing, honey. You know how she is. Families get past these things." So I did what I do professionally when a boundary is in dispute. I stopped arguing and started documenting. Every envelope went in the shoebox in order, with the date on the flap. Every phone call got a note in a spiral pad. I photographed the fence each season, time-stamped, all 4 lines of it, looking frankly gorgeous against the maples. If my mother wanted a paper war, I'd give her the one thing paper wars reward: a perfect record. The only neighbor who said anything out loud was Lorraine Boyd, my grandmother's best friend since before I was born, 71 years old and a retired nurse who does not whisper. She marched a pound cake across the street one Friday, watched my mother's Buick roll off, and said, "Ruth would have had words about this." Then she looked past me, over the back fence toward the garden lot and the old fig tree, and said something I chewed on for weeks. "Your grandmother owned more of this neighborhood than people remember, baby. A lot more." By the following June, the arithmetic had gotten meaner, 40-some envelopes at $50 each, plus the late fees the standards allowed her to stack on top, and the association's ledger now said I owed north of $2,000, and climbing every week. I knew because the total appeared in bold on a new kind of letter, certified this time, green card and all, signed for, at my own kitchen door. Notice of intent to file lion. If the delinquent balance was not paid in full, the Hollis Creek Homeowners Association would record a lien against the property at Lot 12. I read it standing in the hallway with Ruth's clock ticking behind me, and for the first time in 11 months, my hands were not steady. A lien is not a nuisance. A lien is a cloud on your title. It sits in the county records under your name, it follows the house, it complicates refinancing and taints a sale, and to a surveyor, someone whose whole career is built on clean records and true lines, it's a stain you can't power wash off. She wasn't charging me $50 a week anymore. She was reaching for the deed itself, or at least for the right to scribble in its margins. My mother, who taped envelopes with 2 pieces of tape because one might let it fall, was preparing to put her association's name on my grandmother's house. I sat down that night and read the letter maybe 10 times, and then I noticed the small print at the bottom, the part that said where such instruments get recorded. The Office of the Clerk of Superior Court, Merrow County, Georgia. The deed room. The one place in the world where every lie about land eventually goes to die. My mother was threatening to send her paperwork to the courthouse. If I'd been her, I would have thought very carefully before pointing me there. I tried peace first. I want that on the record. Before I ever touched a courthouse, I invited my mother to dinner, and she came, because appearances matter to her, and a daughter's table is an appearance. I made pot roast, Ruth's recipe, which in hindsight was either an olive branch or a provocation. We ate politely for 20 minutes, talking about her hydrangeas and Charlene's grandkids, and then I put my fork down and made my offer. I would pay the balance, all of it, that night, if the fines stopped and the lien threat went away. I even reached for my checkbook, and I watched her face change. A flicker of something that looked almost like disappointment, as if I'd offered to forfeit a game she was finally winning. "It was never about the money, Andrea." "Then what?" I asked. "Was it about?" She lined her silverware up straight on the napkin, took her time, and gave me the sentence I've thought about nearly every day since. "It's about respect." A neighborhood is like a family. It only works if someone holds the line. Rules are how I love you. Rules are how I love you. I sat there with my grandmother's gravy going cold between us and understood we were not talking about a fence, and honestly, never had been. So I asked one more question, gently, the one I'd been circling for months. Why did it all start in September? Why 3 weeks after the estate closed? My mother folded her napkin into a perfect rectangle, and her voice went flat and bright at the same time, like ice. Your grandmother made her choices, she said. I've made mine. She thanked me for dinner at the door like I was a hostess she barely knew. Standing in the porch light, I finally saw the shape of it. The fines had a start date. The start date was the deed. The Merrill County Courthouse sits on the square in Millbrook, and the real estate deed room is in the basement. Fluorescent lights, rolling shelves, that dry paper smell I happen to love. I went on my lunch hour to check whether the lien had actually been recorded yet, because a thread on letterhead and an instrument in the record are two very different animals. Behind the counter was a woman about my age with reading glasses on a chain and the unhurried competence of somebody who has seen every property fight in 3 generations. Her nameplate said D. Whitfield, Deputy Clerk. I gave her my name and parcel number and she typed, and then she looked up at me over the glasses with a small, curious tilt. Miles, she said. Off Hollis Creek Drive? I recorded an estate deed for a Miles last summer. Calder Estate. I remember the survivorship chain. It was tidy. You don't see tidy every day. Turned out Dana Whitfield didn't just work in the deed room. She lived in Hollis Creek herself. Lot 27, the brick ranch with the blue shutters near the entrance. Small county. She checked the index twice for me. No lien on Lot 12. Not yet. Nothing filed. I thanked her and turned to go, and that's when she said the thing she probably says to fidgety property owners every week, the thing that would end up detonating under my mother's podium 2 months later. Records don't care who's loud, Ms. Miles. Folks out your way would be surprised what the index actually shows. She said it mildly, the way you'd mention rain coming. Then she went back to her stamping. I stood in the courthouse parking lot for a while after that, keys in my hand, thinking about indexes, and about the garden lot, and about a question I'd asked my mother a year earlier that she had never actually answered. That Saturday I did something I hadn't done since the funeral. I opened the gate in the back fence and walked the garden lot, end to end, the way Grandma and I used to walk it, shelling peas into a colander. Officially, it's Lot 14. A little over half an acre of good flat ground right behind my place, with her fig tree still holding down the far corner like it pays rent. Except you'd hardly know it was ever a garden now. 6 years ago, the association hauled in a long white office trailer and set it up on blocks at the front of the lot. Hollis Creek HOA, says the vinyl sign, office hours Tuesday and Thursday. Next to it, a gravel parking pad, 14 spaces, striped with landscape timbers. Behind that, the wooden pavilion where the association holds its meetings, its potlucks, its Easter egg hunts. The whole civic heart of the neighborhood, sitting in my grandmother's pea patch. And here's what I need you to understand, because it matters later. I had asked about this. During probate, when the inventory listed the garden lot, I'd asked my mother directly what agreement the association had for all that. A lease, an easement, anything. She'd waved it off mid-sentence. That's community property, honey. Always has been. Don't go stirring papers. I was working 50-hour weeks. The estate lawyer had a 9-month backlog, and the old records were in a county annex you had to request by mail, so the question sat in my someday pile, the way questions do. But standing there that Saturday, I pulled out the association's own welcome map, the glossy one they mail new residents. Lot 14 was shaded green and labeled Common Area, and something in the back of my surveyor brain, some quiet professional alarm, began to ring. Because I had studied the original plat of this subdivision years ago, just out of family curiosity. And I could not for the life of me remember any common area drawn behind Lot 12. Monday morning I did what I should have done a year earlier, and what my mother had specifically waved me off of doing. I ordered a full title examination on Lot 14. Every deed, every plat, every easement, every tax record, the entire chain back to the day this subdivision was a cow pasture with a surveyor's ribbon on it. I hired an examiner I trust, and on my own time I started pulling microfilm in Dana Whitfield's basement deed room, cranking through reels of instruments from the 1980s while the fluorescent lights hummed. This is the unglamorous part they leave out of revenge stories, that the truth mostly lives in file boxes, and it comes out one page at a time, after work, with your eyes burning. The county annex took 3 weeks to produce the old probate files I'd requested. The examiner needed another 2 for the certified chain. I want to be honest about what those weeks felt like, because it wasn't triumph. Not yet. It was dread. Some nights I'd sit in my truck outside the annex and think, what if the answer is ordinary? What if there's a 50-year lease in a drawer somewhere, and I'm just a woman with a shoebox full of envelopes, making a courthouse case out of a mother who doesn't love me the way I needed? That's the part nobody warns you about. Hoping you're wrong and needing to know anyway. If you've ever kept every receipt just to prove to yourself you weren't crazy, I'd truly like to hear about it in the comments, because that shoebox was starting to feel like a second heartbeat in my kitchen. And if you're new here, take 1 second and subscribe. Because the day the certified records finally landed on my porch, in a cardboard tube with the county's return address, everything I thought I knew about my own backyard and my own mother changed for good. While I waited on the county, Lorraine filled in the parts no record book holds. She sat at my kitchen table with sweet tea and told me about 1988, when Hollis Creek was brand new, and Ruth and my grandfather Earl were among the first buyers. They bought Lot 12 to live on. Then Earl, who never trusted a developer farther than he could throw one, bought the vacant lot behind it too. Elbow room, he called it. Ruth called it her garden before the ink dried. The developer had grand plans in those days. The original drawings showed a clubhouse site up front by the entrance. Then he went bankrupt in 1996. The clubhouse never got built, and the neighborhood grew up with no place to gather. So Ruth, being Ruth, simply opened her gate. Easter egg hunts among the bean rows. 4th of July tables under the fig tree. The neighborhood held its picnics on her lot for so many years that people stopped remembering it was hers at all, and she never once corrected them, because being needed, she liked to say, keeps a neighborhood warm. Earl passed in 2009, and the lot became hers alone. Then Lorraine set down her tea and got to the part that made my scalp prickle. But she wasn't a fool, your grandmother. When the board came asking to park that office trailer out there, 2019 that was, Ruthie wrote them a letter. Read it to me on this very porch before she sent it. Real polite, real clear. A letter, I said. What kind of letter? Lorraine smiled the way old nurses smile when they've seen the chart and you haven't. The kind you notarize, baby. Ruth kept a copy in that green file box of hers. You might want to go find it. The green file box. It was sitting 8 feet from us, in the hall closet, where it had waited patiently through the whole 11 months of Fridays. The certified records and Ruth's green file box came together on my kitchen table on a Thursday night in July, and I will remember that table for the rest of my life. Start with the tube. Inside the cardboard mailing tube from the county was a certified copy of the recorded plat. Plat Book 9, page 118, filed in 1987. And there it was in the surveyor's own line work. Lot 14. Not shaded, not dedicated, not labeled common anything. A private, numbered, buildable lot, same as mine, same as everyone's. The examiner's report walked the chain like stepping stones. 1988, warranty deed, developer to Ruth and Earl Calder, joint tenants with right of survivorship. 2009, Earl dies, title vests in Ruth alone. Last summer, when probate closed, assent to devise from the estate. Recorded, indexed, stamped by D. Whitfield herself. Current owner of record of Lot 14, Andrea R. Miles. No lease to the association, no easement, no license, no dedication, no conveyance of any kind, not in 38 years. And stapled behind the deeds, the part that made me put my hand over my mouth, the tax rolls. Every year since 1988, the property taxes on Lot 14 had been billed to and paid by Calder, then the estate, then Miles. My grandmother had quietly paid the taxes on the neighborhood's gathering place for decades. I had been paying them myself since the estate closed, on autopay, filed in my head under estate odds and ends, the HOA office, the parking pad, the pavilion, the podium my mother gavelled from every month, all of it sat on land she did not own, had never owned, and knew the association had never owned. It was mine. It had been Ruth's, and now it was mine, recorded in black ink in a courthouse basement. I rolled the plat back up, slid it into its tube, and stood it by the front door like an umbrella, and from that night on, it never left that spot. Don't ever confuse the one holding the clipboard with the one holding the deed. I used to think that line was a joke. It was a will, is what it was. It just took me 20 years to probate it. I took the whole file to Warren Hale, a real estate attorney in Millbrook my firm has worked with for years. 52. Unflappable. Reads deeds the way other men read box scores. He went through everything twice, set down his glasses, and said it was the cleanest ownership question he'd seen all year. Then he walked me through it, plain as a property line. In Georgia, someone occupying land they don't own needs 20 years of continuous hostile possession to claim it. 7 if they hold some defective paper that at least pretends to give them title. And the association held nothing, not so much as a napkin. 6 years of trailer doesn't begin to reach it. And it gets better, he said, tapping the green file box, because possession that starts with the owner's permission never counts at all. Permission poisons the clock. Legally, they were exactly what Ruth's letter made them. Guests. So, what are my options? He counted them off. I could revoke permission and have them off the lot in 60 days. I could charge for the use they'd already had. Fair rental on that office pad and parking, he figured around $275 a month. And 6 years of that runs $19,800, though as a practical matter the courts would only reach back about 4 years of it. Or I could simply put the truth on the record and let the association come to terms. You hold every card, Andrea. The only question is what kind of neighbor you want to be when this is over. I drove home and didn't call him back for a week, because the honest answer was, I still wanted to be a daughter. Then the annual meeting notice arrived in my mailbox on association letterhead, agenda enclosed. Item 4, delinquent accounts to be read. Item 5, community lot improvement. $40,000 paving assessment, discussion, and vote. They were going to pave my grandmother's garden and charge the neighborhood for the privilege. I read that agenda in the driveway and something in me went very quiet and very clear. Up until then, my silence had cost only me $50 a week, one woman's Fridays, a private tax on keeping the peace, my bill, my choice to pay it. But this was different arithmetic. A $40,000 special assessment, split across 112 households, to pour asphalt over land the association did not own. Mrs. Abernathy on her pension would be paying it. The young couple on the corner with the twins would be paying it. Dana Whitfield, Lot 27, would be paying it. Every neighbor who'd smiled at me by the mailboxes would be billed hundreds of dollars to blacktop my grandmother's fig tree. And the day the truth surfaced, and truth about land always surfaces, the association would be looking at tearing it out or paying me for the ground under it. Either way, at the neighborhood's expense. My mother wasn't just overreaching now, she was about to march 60 families into a hole, chin up, clipboard first. And if I kept sitting on that plat tube to spare her, I wasn't keeping the peace anymore. I was co-signing the damage. There's a word for staying silent while people you know get charged for something false, and the word is not daughterly. So I made a decision. And I want to be precise about the order of things, because it matters to me that you know I did this part right. Before any meeting, before any clerk raised any hand, I gave my mother one last private chance to turn the car around. Not for strategy. Warren advised against it, actually. Said surprise was worth money. I did it anyway, because she taped those envelopes with 2 pieces of tape so they wouldn't fall, and a woman that careful deserved one careful warning. I drove to Camellia Court on a Sunday afternoon, and I knocked on my mother's door. She let me in and made coffee neither of us drank. Her house looked the way it always looks. Plastic on nothing, dust on nothing, every picture frame level. I didn't circle. I said, Mom, drop the fines, cancel the lien letter, and before Thursday ask me, about Lot 14. Her chin came up a 1/4 inch. If you didn't know her, you'd have missed it. That lot belongs to this association, she said, each word laid down like brick. I asked her if she was sure. I asked her to just pull the deed. One phone call. The county would tell her in 5 minutes. I don't need a county computer to tell me what I've known for 40 years. And round we went, polite as a knife fight in church, until I stopped hearing the words and started seeing the room. Because on her dining table, laid out like a museum exhibit, was the association binder. 25 years of minutes in her handwriting, every meeting, every motion, tabbed and chronological. Nobody reads those. I'm not sure anyone but me has ever seen them. And on the wall above, the framed photos, the neighborhood 4th of July, 1990-something. All those families under Ruth's fig tree, Ruth at the center holding court with a pitcher of tea. My mother is in that photo too. You have to look for her. She's at the edge of the frame, holding a tray, half turned away, the way she is in every picture from those years. The woman who did everything and got remembered for none of it, standing on the margin of her own mother's kingdom. Andrea. Her voice had gone quiet, and for 1 second, it wasn't the president's voice. You were gone 11 years. You come back, and everything just lands in your lap. The house, the lot, her. Then the blazer went back on, so to speak. Rules are how I love you. Someday you'll understand that. Word travels ahead of a person in a small subdivision, and my mother made sure it traveled. By midweek, the temperature at the mailboxes had dropped 10 degrees. Mrs. Abernathy, who I'd shoveled out after the ice storm, gave me a nod you'd give a process server. Somebody's teenager rode past my fence and said, "Nice colors," in a way that wasn't about colors. The story going around, Lorraine reported, was that Ruth's granddaughter had gotten the house, gotten everything, and was now cooking up some scheme to cause trouble for the neighborhood over it. Entitled, "Ungrateful." You know how that generation is. My mother didn't invent that story out of laziness. She invented it out of skill. Isolation is a tool, same as a lien. So it was a strange, freezing comfort that same night to find the thing I found at the bottom of Ruth's green file box in a folder labeled "Garden Lot" in my grandmother's back-slanted hand. The original of the letter Lorraine had described. Dated March 2019. Addressed to the board of the Hollis Creek Homeowners Association. Ruth's voice in every line, courteous as a church supper and unambiguous as a survey stake. She was pleased to allow the association to place its office trailer on her property, Lot 14. The use remained by her permission alone. The permission was revocable at any time, and nothing in the arrangement should ever be mistaken for a transfer because, her exact words, I've read them 100 times. The lot is not association property, and my family's ownership is not up for a vote. Notarized. And stapled to it, the delivery receipt from the board's own correspondence file, acknowledging the letter on behalf of the association, received and filed by the secretary. Signed, in handwriting I'd know anywhere, because it used to sign my permission slips, Carolyn Miles. She knew. She had always known. My mother wasn't finding offense. She was finding the name on a deed she'd spent 6 years trying to erase. There's a moment in every survey when you stop checking the corners and set the stake, and after that, the line simply is what it is. Mine came on a Tuesday evening in Warren Hale's office, under a ceiling fan older than me. 2 documents, side by side, waiting for my signature. The first, notice of ownership and termination of permissive use. Formal notice to the Hollis Creek Homeowners Association that Lot 14 was privately owned, that the permission first extended by Ruth Calder was revoked, and that continued occupancy would require a written agreement with the owner. The second, an invoice. Fair rental value of one office site and parking area, $275 per month, 72 months. Total, $19,800. My name at the bottom, plain as a stake. I signed both, and we sent them certified mail to the association's registered agent at its office address on file with the state, which, when you looked it up, was a post office box in Millbrook, collected weekly by exactly one person, whose name you can probably guess. Then I mailed my RSVP for the annual meeting, the first one I'd ever planned to attend. Warren asked one final time if I wanted to skip the theater, send the papers, let the lawyers settle it in offices, quiet and bloodless. I thought about it. I truly did. Then I thought about item 4 on that agenda. Delinquent accounts, to be read. My mother wasn't planning a quiet settlement of anything. She was planning to read my name out loud to 60 households under a pavilion that sat on my land, and she'd been planning it for 11 months of Fridays. No. Some notices you tape to a door. Driving home, I passed her Buick parked at the trailer on lot 14, light in the window, my mother at her desk on my grandmother's ground, preparing her list of my violations. The certified slip would sit in that post office box all week. She never went to get it. The last Friday came 6 days before the meeting. 7:40 in the morning, the tan Buick, the blazer, the envelope, the tape, the whole liturgy. Except this time there were 2 pages inside, the violation and a copy of the lien warning, in case I'd misplaced my dread. And this time, for the first time in 46 Fridays, I didn't watch from behind the curtain. I took my coffee out onto Ruth's porch and stood there in the morning cool, while my mother came up the walk. She stopped. For a half second the choreography failed her. You could see the program hunting for a page that wasn't in it. Then she recovered, taped the envelope to the door anyway, 8 inches from my shoulder, pressed the corners down twice. Up close, her perfume was the same one she's worn since I was in grade school. "You're up early," she said. I said, "See you Thursday, Mom." Something crossed her face. Surprise first, then a flicker of what I'd almost call hope, because in her arithmetic my attendance meant surrender, the daughter finally coming to be corrected in public, the last holdout complying at last. "That's good, Andrea," she said, softer than she'd spoken to me in a year. "It'll be good for people to see you there." She walked back to the Buick with her chin up, and I stood on the porch and let her have it. That little victory. 6 days of it, because it was the last thing I'd ever owe her, and I paid it gladly. 46 envelopes. I kept every one, the same way my grandmother kept every tax receipt for 38 years, and that shoebox was coming to the meeting with me. If someone in your family ever mistook your silence for surrender, if you've been the one holding your coffee steady while somebody taped their verdict to your door, then Thursday night is for you. Stay with me. We're almost there. Wednesday night, Lorraine came over with a coffee can full of cut roses from the bushes Ruth had given her years ago, because that's who Lorraine is. She brings flowers to a paperwork fight. We sat at the kitchen table and I packed my bag like a surveyor stakes a job. Nothing extra, nothing missing. The Mylar tube with the certified plat. The examiner's title chain, tabbed. 38 years of tax receipts, bundled by decade with rubber bands. Ruth's 2019 letter with the signed receipt stapled where it had always been stapled. The shoebox, all 46 envelopes in order. And one more envelope, new, white, thick, that I'm not going to tell you about yet, except that preparing it was Warren's idea and deciding how to use it was entirely mine. Then I did something that surprised me. I took a legal pad and drew a line down the middle, force of habit, and titled the columns, what I could take and what I actually want. The left column filled up fast and ugly, evict them in 60 days. Sue for 4 years of back rent, watch her explain the paving money, stand at that podium and read her file out loud, line by line, the way she'd planned to read mine. See how she liked the liturgy from the other side. I looked at that column a long time, and I'm not going to pretend it didn't glitter. Then I wrote the right column, and it was 3 lines, and it was in my grandmother's voice more than my own. Keep the garden. End the Fridays. Come home to a neighborhood, not a battlefield. I tore the page off, folded it into my bag with everything else, and turned off the kitchen light. Lorraine squeezed my hand at the door. "What are you going to do, baby?" I told her the truth. I wasn't bringing a microphone. I was bringing a map tube. It turns out that's all I needed. The annual meeting of the Hollis Creek Homeowners Association convened at 7 o'clock on a Thursday evening in August, under the pavilion on Lot 14, which nobody but me yet knew was the punchline. Georgia in August. Ceiling fans stirring soup-warm air, bug spray and folding chairs, 60-odd households worth of neighbors fanning themselves with agendas printed on yellow paper. Pete Grady sat at the treasurer's table with his ledgers. Dana Whitfield sat in the 3rd row in a sundress, a homeowner tonight, not a clerk, though I'd have bet my license she never fully takes the deed room off. Lorraine planted herself beside me, 2nd row. Roses, ready like ammunition. And my mother stood at the podium in the navy blazer with a gavel she'd bought herself, running the room like the school office of old. Minutes approved, budget reviewed, brisk, competent, entirely in command. Then she squared her shoulders in a way I recognized from 46 Friday mornings and arrived at item 4. Delinquent accounts. The board believes in transparency, so this year, delinquencies will be read into the record. Her eyes came to me, and I watched 11 months arrive at their intended destination. Lot 12, Andrea Miles, 46 violations, unapproved fence stain, south and west lines. And then she read them. Not the total. Each one. The same violation, the same fence, the same $50, September through August, date by date. Her voice level and pleasant, like a bailiff with excellent posture, while my neighbors turned to look at me the way people look at a car wreck they feel bad for slowing down past. Somebody's husband chuckled somewhere in the back. Lorraine's hand found my knee. I sat still and let every date land, because I have stood in July sun holding a rod steady for lesser reasons, and steadiness is the one thing I've never had to borrow. She finished my file, let the silence do its work, and turned the page. Which brings us to item 5. The community lot. This association, my mother said, has maintained our community lot for many years, and it's time we invested in it properly. She held up a rendering, asphalt gray and optimistic. The paving project, 20 new spaces, expanded office pad, curbing around, I noted, the exact spot where the fig tree currently stands. The special assessment comes to $40,000, divided among all households. The board recommends approval. Chairs creaked. Somebody muttered about money. She wrote over it with the ease of 6 years of gavels. I'll entertain a motion. And a hand went up in the third row, unhurried. The way a hand goes up when it already knows the answer. Point of information, Madam President. Dana Whitfield didn't stand at first. She just tilted her head, glasses down her nose, and asked, in the mild administrative tone that I now know is the most dangerous sound in Merrow County. Ma'am, before you continue, who do you think owns Lot 14? A beat. The association owns it, obviously, my mother said. This lot has been community property for... I ask, Dana went on, gently, terribly, because I work in the real estate division at the Clerk of Superior Court. I record the deeds for this county. All of them. She stood now, agenda folded in her hand like a citation. And before I vote to spend my money paving this lot, you should know the county has no record, none, of this association ever owning 1 square foot of the ground we are currently sitting on. The pavilion made a sound I'd never heard 60 adults make, a sort of collective intake, 60 lungs on one hinge. My mother banged the gavel. For the first time in 6 years, the gavel didn't work. The murmur rolled right over it, and through it came Pete Grady's voice from the treasurer's table, slow and careful, a man doing math he suddenly didn't like. Carolyn, whose lot are we on? And every head under that pavilion turned toward the woman holding the map tube. I stood up slowly because fast never surveyed anything, and I walked to the front carrying the tube and the bag, and I asked Pete, not my mother, for the use of the table. Then I did the thing I do for a living, in front of 60 people on my grandmother's land. I uncapped the tube, slid out the certified plat, and unrolled it across the treasurer's table, weighting the corners with Pete's ledger and somebody's citronella candle, and the crackle of that mylar was the only sound under the pavilion. My name is Andrea Miles, I said. Most of you know me as the fence lady from item 4. I'm also a licensed land surveyor, and I'd like to show you one document. Plat Book 9, page 118, recorded 1987. This subdivision, the original, certified. I put my finger on it. This is Lot 14. This pavilion, the office trailer, the parking pad. On the record plat, it is a private numbered lot. It has never been dedicated as common area. In 1988, it was deeded to Ruth and Earl Calder, my grandparents. The murmur started low. I kept my voice at rod-holding steadiness and walked the chain, document by document, dates and instruments. The survivorship to Ruth, the estate, the assent to devise recorded last summer. The current owner of record of Lot 14 is me. I set down the bundled tax receipts. My family has paid the property taxes on this ground for 38 years. My grandmother paid them while she hosted your egg hunts. I've paid them while your association fined my fence. And then I took out Ruth's letter, and I read it. March 2019. Use remains by my permission alone. The lot is not association property, and my family's ownership is not up for a vote. And I held up the stapled receipt, and I said, as evenly as I have ever said anything. The board acknowledged this letter in writing when it was delivered. Received and filed by the secretary. The signature is Carolyn Miles. I did not look at my mother while the pavilion turned to her. I looked at the fig tree. My grandmother used to say, "Don't ever confuse the one holding the clipboard with the one holding the deed." Behind me the gavel came down, once, twice. This meeting is adjourned. And Pete Grady, kind, careful Pete, said the bravest sentence of the night without raising his voice. No, it isn't. I'd like to hear the rest. What happened next is the part I'd rehearsed for, because a room that turns is a dangerous animal, and it turned fast. Somebody called out that the board should resign tonight. Somebody else, braver in a crowd, shouted, "Evict the office. See how she likes a notice on her door." And there was laughter with teeth in it. And my mother stood gripping the edge of the podium as 60 faces did to her what her envelopes had spent 11 months doing to me. And here is the truth I'll admit to you, that I didn't admit to anyone that night. Some low, tired part of me wanted to let it run. I had the left-hand column in my bag. I had the votes, suddenly, and the ground, literally. All I had to do was nothing. Instead, I raised my hand for quiet and, strangest feeling of my life, the room I'd never governed gave it to me. Nobody's getting evicted, I said. I want to be very clear about what happens now, because unlike item 4, I believe in doing arithmetic in private and decisions in public. I took out the thick white envelope and laid it on the mylar. This is an invoice from me to the association. Fair rental for the office and parking you've enjoyed on my property. $275 a month, 6 years, $19,800. The number went through the crowd like cold water. You billed me every Friday for 11 months, I said, and I finally looked at my mother. Here's one invoice for 6 years. Now you know how a Friday feels. I let that sit exactly one breath. And here is what I'll take instead. I turned the page. A lease. $1 a year, 5 years. My signature ready tonight. 4 conditions. The 46 fines are refunded in full and the lien letter is withdrawn. That's $2,300, and every late fee dies with it. The paving project is dead. Nobody assesses this neighborhood $40,000 for my backyard. Fine appeals go to an independent committee. No one on this board ever again rules on a fine they signed. And the corner with the fig tree gets fenced off and replanted as a community garden with my grandmother's name on it. Meet those terms, and the invoice goes back in the envelope, and your office stays right where it is. As my tenant. On paper. The way my grandmother should have been thanked instead of forgotten. I could hear the ceiling fans again. Mom. She was looking at me the way you look at a stranger wearing a familiar face. For 11 months you taught me exactly what a rule is worth when the wrong person is holding the clipboard. Grandma taught me who's holding the deed. Borrowed power always comes with a due date. Yours is tonight. My voice didn't rise once, and hers never got the chance to. That was the whole revenge. A survey stake, set at last in the right ground. And the only thing it cost me was the last soft hope that my mother would someday clap. Pete Grady moved to accept the terms pending attorney review, and seconded hands went up so fast and so thick that my mother's own neighbors couldn't meet her eyes while they raised them. It carried in under a minute. And my mother. I want to tell this part carefully, because she is not a cartoon. She is my mother. Stood at the podium she'd held for 6 years and watched her borrowed country vote itself out from under her. She didn't yell. Yelling was never her instrument. Procedure was. And procedure had just changed hands. She gathered her agenda pages, squared their edges twice the way she squares everything, and then she stepped to the treasurer's table and she set the gavel down on the corner of my grandmother's plat. Wood on mylar. Borrowed power, laid down on the record. The sound it made was very small. Then I'll offer my resignation, she said, to the room and to nobody. Effective tonight. And as she passed me, this is the part I've never told anyone until now. She stopped, close enough that only I and maybe Lorraine could hear it, and for the first time all night, all year, maybe all my life, she spoke to me in a voice with nothing borrowed in it at all. That lot was supposed to be mine. That's it. That's what 11 months of Fridays had been carrying all along under the tape. Not a fence, a will. A mother who ran every room she was ever given because the one thing she wanted was never given to her. And a grandmother who knew exactly what she was doing when she skipped a generation. God help all three of us. She walked out between the folding chairs with her chin up, and 60 people let her go in silence, and I stood there holding the gavel-weighted corner of my plait, and understood that winning doesn't sound like fireworks. It sounds like ceiling fans, and one very small piece of wood coming to rest. The paperwork held, because good paperwork does. Warren and the association's attorney had the lease signed within 2 weeks. $1 a year, 5 years, 60-day terms, recorded. Dana stamped it herself and said, "Deadpan. Nice Mylar. Nicest compliment of my career." The refund check arrived in an envelope that I'll confess I let sit on the counter a full day before opening, out of respect for the genre. $2,300, drawn on the association account, and in the memo line, in Pete Grady's blocky treasurer's print, refund, all of it. The lien letter was formally withdrawn. The paving plan died without a second. The appeals committee exists now, 3 rotating homeowners, no board members, and its first published ruling walked back 2 other fines my mother had issued last year, one of them against a widower's vegetable trellis. And in October, the neighborhood came out with shovels and did the thing I'd asked for last, which turned out to matter most. The corner of Lot 14 got a cedar fence, dove gray they insisted, and I let them. And inside it, raised beds, and a small routed sign that Lorraine unveiled crying, "Ruth's Corner." My certified letter to the association's post office box came back 6 weeks after the meeting, stamped unclaimed, never opened. My mother taped envelopes to my door for 11 months, and in the end, she couldn't bring herself to open the one I sent her. I keep it in the green file box, still sealed. Some records you don't need to read to understand. As for her, she resigned, but she didn't move, didn't apologize, didn't call. She waters her hydrangeas on Camellia Court, and some of the neighbors still wave, because a lot of them owe her a cleared driveway or a fixed drain, and that ledger is real too. At Thanksgiving my phone lit up with a message from her, the first in 3 months, short enough to fit on a violation notice. "Your grandmother would be pleased. She usually was with you." I read it maybe 30 times. I didn't answer it that night. I went out back and watered the fig tree in the dark instead. And when Pete called in December to ask if I'd consider a seat on the new board, I laughed for the first time in a while. I measure boundaries for a living. I have no ambition to govern anybody's. This morning was a Friday. 7:40 came and went, and the street stayed empty. No Buick, no Blazer, no tape. I took my coffee out to the porch the way I used to with Ruth, and the fence stood there being quietly, illegally, permanently gray, and past it, over on Lot 14, 2 kids from the North Loop were poking around under the fig tree, hunting the last ripe figs of the season, which is exactly what that tree is for. The shoebox went up to the attic last week, next to Ruth's canning jars. I didn't burn the envelopes, and I won't. Receipts are like fences. They only look ugly to the person standing on the wrong side of them. 46 Fridays. My mother spent teaching me what she thought I was. A name on a list, a balance due. It took 1 Thursday, 1 map, and 1 question from the 3rd row to remind us both what I actually am. The name on the deed. If you take one thing from my story, let it be this: borrowed power always comes with a due date, and the quietest person in the room is sometimes the one holding the deed. That's my story. 46 envelopes, 1 question from the 3rd row, and a garden that got its name back. If this reminded you to pull your own paper trail, a deed, a will, a boundary you've been meaning to draw, take that as your sign, and do it this week. Share this video with someone who's paying for peace in weekly installments. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.